All right. Can everybody see that?
Oh yeah, it's perfect.
Like full screen? Okay. I can't tell. Okay. So, yeah, my name's Eric. I'm going to talk about creating a killer podcast, and I'm actually going to time myself. I'm going to see if I can actually hit my 7-minute mark because I've been practicing. So quick, like summary outline, there's actually a lot to talk about. So what I tried to do is just break it down to the basics. Like there's the hardware that you need, obviously the software that makes it possible for you to kind of put the whole thing together, label it, get it up there, and get it out into the world. Talk a little bit about capturing the audio, actually building the show, which is probably like the most amount of time that you spend on any given episode, and then just like a little bit about distributing the content, and then obviously like questions after that. So this is sort of like the basic hardware that I sort of collected when I decided I was going to start doing a podcast. And I'll tell you a little bit about the podcast in a minute, but the headphones I'm actually wearing right now, but I can't keep them on because it's making this weird vibration in my head. So I'm going to talk without them on. That Zoom H4n is a digital recorder. I bought that just because I was sort of like doing some work with the agency I work for, and we had to capture some audio, so I had that already. And then the lav mics, those were a little bit pricey, but the reason why I did that is because the podcast that I did, the format was I would actually go and meet the people that I was interviewing, like out in different places. And so this sort of setup made it easier for me to kind of keep things light and kind of plug it in, set it up. We talk, and then we go. The other cool thing though about the Zoom H4n is it's got like, as you can see kind of at the top there's like onboard mics as well. So you could theoretically just kind of place that down on a table and then get, as long as the room was quiet, you could record two people talking. The lav mics make it a little bit better because they sort of focus on the voice, and they are able to sort of cut out a lot of the ambient noise. But this guy is another option. It's actually, these Samson mics are pretty great. I mean, they're used on like stages. They're very cheap. You can actually, I checked some of the pricing on this. You can buy like a 3-pack of these right now for like $69.99. You have to buy the XLR cables in addition to them. So, it's a little bit more expensive, but definitely cheaper than the lav thing. The one thing about having this kind of a mic instead of the lav mics have kind of a low handling noise, which means like if you're moving around, somebody kind of leans back or forward, or their coat brushes up against it, it's not going to have as big of an impact as if you're holding the mic. Or if it's on a stand on the table and you kind of like tap the table, you're going to get a lot more feedback that way, or not distortion, but interference. But both mic options are really great for interviewing and for people talking into them, because you've got, in terms of the Samson, it's a super cardioid, which means actually the sound is really focused kind of at the top and the center of the mic. So on the side and toward the stem where you're holding it, it's not going to pick up as much noise. So that's the hardware. In terms of the software, the good news is a lot of this stuff is free or really cheap. Audacity, which is the editor, essentially it's pretty great. I'll show you the interface in a minute, but you basically dump your raw files in there. You've got like your timelines, and you can kind of edit everything down, cut it up however you want, and export the thing as an MP3. The levelator, which I guess the spell check made it the levitator. It's the levelator. It kind of works as a compressor, normalizer, and limiter all in one. And basically what that means is if you are out and recording, sometimes I usually wear my headphones while I'm actually talking to the people that I'm interviewing, because you can kind of get a sense if the levels are too high and you're getting a little bit of distortion or clip. But sometimes you can't really hear it. until after you're playing back. And the levelator thing is that you drop the file in and it kind of cleans that up for you, so you at least don't have the those harsh peaks or pops, and it makes it a little bit better. Pod Clear is something that I actually just recently found out about, that I have never actually used, but I thought it was really cool because, again, like, a lot of the podcasts, you get people that you're interviewing and they're remote. What this basically does is they're set up to record. They record into the PodClear software, and what you get at the end is like kind of like a file that you can then just drop into your timeline, and you can record, and it's as if basically they've recorded, say, straight into the digital recorder that you had. So that's kind of a cool tool. It's not that expensive either. So it's just good to know about. Super important thing that I actually didn't know about when I first started. And then, at the end, when I had my MP3 files, I'm like, hey, how do I get this information into the actual file? And when it goes up on iTunes so that people can actually see the show art and get a sense of like what it is. The ID3 editor, it's free, and that's for the Mac. And I'll show you that too in a minute. And then EasyTag, I think that also works for a Mac, but it's also, you can use it for PC and Linux. So that's just for the metadata for your podcast files, your MP3s. So now capturing the audio. So this is actually a picture of the bar that I interviewed one of my guests in. His name's Dan. He actually wrote, he used to write comics, and I worked with him at an ad agency. And so we sort of like went and geeked out about it. The thing about this was the lav mics came in handy because they did help to kind of reduce the noise, but I have a link to the show, so if you want to listen to the episode later, you can still hear like a lot of the noise, because even though it was a small bar and it was pretty intimate, it was actually right by our office. It was kind of noisy enough. So just to kind of getting the sense of like, if you're going to do it outside or wherever you're going to do it, try to make it a quiet or relatively quiet spot that you can talk. And then obviously, like, the better your mic setup, the better you're going to end up with, better quality audio at the end. I happen to like the in-person interview better, because I felt like it was easier to connect with the people. My podcast was about, so basically, like, I work in advertising. I've been working in it for a long time. And a lot of the people, the creatives that I work with, all have like some kind of side gig. Like Dan wrote for Marvel Comics for a while, and he's got all kinds of other stuff going on. My other friend Bruce, who's just the other episode that I'm going to share with you guys, was a musician. He actually like got on the David Letterman show before he got into advertising. He just decided, he's going to give it up and then go do that. And what was cool about that was like he actually let me record one of his shows. So that episode, I was able to kind of like mix in like, a song in between the segments of him talking about kind of that experience. So another next thing is, prepping lots of questions. I think it's kind of important. Like it's even though you know what you're going to talk about, and you might know it really well, or you might know the person really well. For example, Bruce and I, like, we had known each other for like over 10 years by the time I talked, but I kind of was really glad that I wrote down a lot of the questions that I thought would be interesting for the people that were going to listen to it. Because, when you know somebody really well, you might just slip into that, hey, we're just talking. And then it just becomes kind of possibly really boring for people that are listening that don't know you or your guest, even if both of you are super, like, the most interesting people in the world. Recording more material than you need is super important also, and that's like why I'm saying prep a lot of questions, because you don't want to go overboard, because honestly, if you end up with 3 hours worth of stuff and you're going to cut it down to 30 minutes, that's a lot of editing time, because the first thing you have to do is just sit there and listen to all that audio and then start to construct like what is the pacing of the show, and you trying to put that together. But if you're trying to get it at 30 minutes, like 90 minutes is kind of like a good clip, or if you can get it to an hour and 15. And then while you're talking, just like have a little pad and take notes just on like points that you think, oh wow, this is really cool. Because like, for example, with Dan, there were a couple of stories that he told. One was about like having his house infested with ladybugs, which I just thought was hilarious. And it was kind of like a weird story. I'd never heard him tell it before. But so I put that in there, and it was just kind of like a random aside, but it was just kind of fun. So so building the show. So I'm gonna actually, let me see if I can, hold on. Can I do this? Oh wait. Okay, I'm gonna try. So I actually have, oh wait, I've got to do stop share screen. Maybe run through it again. Nope. Hang on, and I can't hear anything. Right. Where are you? Okay, can you guys see that?
We can't tell. It just loaded up. So
can you see that?
We see your PowerPoint, it looks like, or Keynote.
No, it should be like the Audacity. Oh, I see what's happening. Hang on a sec. Here we go. All right. Now I'm getting the hang of this. All right. So can you see that?
Now we can. Yeah.
Sort of the timeline. So this is sort of like the Audacity interface. And I just wanted to kind of show you, like, this is like the final edit that I ended up with. So like at the beginning, you've got like, this is the kind of intro music. This is like me talking over the intro, talking over it. This is the first song that Bruce kind of performed. And then as you kind of go, so you'd see like I layered it in, and you can kind of see the points where like I kind of did fade crossfades and got that through. So it's actually pretty easy to use. It's relatively intuitive. But as you can see, there's a lot of layers, and it goes down and down and down, and like depends on the way you want to build the show, but you're getting like, you got a lot of pieces that you're putting together. And basically what I had when I got to do this is I had the show, which I recorded, which I think he did 5 or 6 songs. I had the interview that I did with him, which was about 45 minutes because he actually didn't have a lot of time. And then after that, I kind of went through, I listened to the interview, and then I wrote an intro and kind of an outro, and just so that I could set the show up for the people that are listening to it. And then, kind of recorded that. And so then I had to kind of piece it all together. So this is sort of what it looks like. You kind of export it, and now I'm going to go back here into this and talk about kind of building the show. So you can see the screenshot there too. There's also this is the Evernote that I kind of use. You can kind of see the intro that I wrote. So dealing with the raw files. So first you just have to drop them into Audacity, and then you just start kind of carving them up and saving them out. It's a bit laborious, and it can be a little bit boring, but like if you get into the whole thing about like if you get an outline together first with what you think you want to kind of do with it, it could kind of be fun because it's like putting a puzzle together. And then the writing, the intros and outros, it's a good idea if you're going to pre-record stuff. Like there's some podcasts that I know that some of you guys listen to, that I listen to with the ThoughtBot stuff, where they just sort of turn the mics on and they talk, and they've got maybe their bullet list of topics. This is sort of more of like it's just sort of like since it's an interview based thing, I was trying to kind of put the pieces together around it. Writing the show notes is important. That's also something that, where you can share links to people's like material. Like I had links off to Bruce's like performance on the Late Night with David Letterman. Licensing is something to talk about that really quickly. There are tons of stock audio sites that for pretty cheaply, like I basically bought like a theme that I kind of liked, that I used for all my episodes. So like it opens and closes everything. And then I can kind of come in and talk over when I do my intro. And I think I bought it for like $30, and then they give you 4 or 5 different cuts, like a 60-second version, 30-second, 15-second. Some of them will even give you the stems if you're really going to get adventurous and you want to build your own kind of remix. The other thing about like this is, again, like it takes a long time, depending on how much material and how you want to build your show. So giving yourself the time to get the edit right is important. When I did this show, I did about 8 episodes. I had about 12 interviews done, but I got to the point where I actually was spending so much time doing the edits, and because I was the only person producing it, that I sort of stopped, just because of the time. It took so much time. I'm pretty proud of like what I did, but it was, again, it was a pretty, it's amateur radio, but it was a lot of fun because I got to learn about every single aspect of producing a show. In terms of the show length, I think 30 to 45 minutes is kind of a good length. And then in terms of like ads and stuff, you don't really have to worry about that when you're just kind of starting out, because like, to be honest, it's really hard to get noticed. But if you put your stuff out on Stitcher, they'll get in contact with you because they'll be like, oh, hey, just letting you know we're here for you. If you start getting subscribers, then they'll start like calling you like about getting sponsorships or ad buys in there. And then Libsyn, which is one of the podcast hosts, you can kind of set it up so that you'll allow them to sort of insert ads into your show, but that's just an option. So speaking of which, distributing the content. So there's kind of 2 things to think about. One is the hosting, because if your files aren't up on a server and can't be streamed, they won't show up on iTunes, and Stitcher can't get them either. You don't upload them kind of there. They're not giving you server space. Libsyn is kind of the first and the godfather of podcasting, and you can tell by that little astronaut dude riding that ancient iPod. Simplecast is another one that's been more recent onto the scene. I've never used it, but I really kind of liked it because they also kind of offer you kind of these mini sitelets that are easy to build. So if you don't want to code your own, it gives you a place to kind of host, other parts of photos or little write-ups of the show if you want to include that, as well as links. And then SoundCloud is kind of interesting because you do upload your files there, and then because it's like sort of a social media platform, you can just start embedding that everywhere. So in addition to kind of like having it go to iTunes or through Stitcher, you're able to kind of distribute it the way that you want. And so, my last screen, I've actually put a lot of the links here because I think, again, this is a big topic. There's a lot of stuff and a lot of things you can do. So like I said, there's these 2 episodes that I produced that I thought were the most interesting. Dan Chichester and Bruce Henderson. I have a link to On the Rocks Yelp page in case you guys are in New York and you want to have a visit, because it's actually a pretty good whiskey bar. And then there's links for Audacity, Levelator, the ID3 editor, EasyTag, PodClear, places where you can go download the stuff, and then get more information on the hosting and distribution stuff. So that's pretty much my talk.
Super fascinating. I knew like none of that stuff, and it really kind of like is way more complicated than I ever would have imagined. I kind of imagined that most podcasts were just like 2 people talking and then they just shipped the product, and I didn't realize all of the work that goes on behind the scenes. So it's really interesting. So one thing that I kind of want to just see if like, I think this is what you sort of were getting to the point of, but I'm curious if I'm sort of got the point correctly, is so first you come up with like a raw, like kind of a, like the questions, but you don't necessarily think through how it's going to all fit together. And then you get the actual content and you like listen to it. And then you build sort of like a rough draft, and then you start like pulling things together, like building up almost a storyline and like architecting it all together. Is that sort of the correct sort of gist of it?
That's how I did it. And I think, to be honest, like when I came up with the idea for the show, it was sort of like it was more about, for me, I was kind of like listening to a lot of like, Radio Lab, and I'm listening to like This American Life, and that they've got like teams of people, and they spend a lot of time sifting through all this material, and then they like edit it together, and then they start kind of inserting all these, transition sounds and things. The first episode I did, actually, I literally I met my friend Brooke at a restaurant, and I put the thing down on the table. The audio sounded like absolute crap. And then it was like so much, and because I didn't kind of have it planned out, it sort of went on, and we talked for like 2 hours, and I couldn't find natural breakpoints. So then what I had to do was kind of like work in these weird transitions, which is like, just kind of weird musical things. So that's at that point when I kind of realized, okay, I got to think about this in terms of like structuring the show, because it's not going to be like sort of like the, giant robots smashing into other giant, like they have their own studio, they have a guest come in, they've got a list of things to talk about, or even the Ruby on Rails podcast. Like those are awesome. Because they can kind of do that. Mine were kind of more about people and telling their personal stories. So I wanted to give them some space to talk, but then at the same time, it's like you have to sort of guide them to the point where you're going, okay, chunk it out. Like I don't want to go more than 5 minutes on a blah, 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 because then people just might get completely bored. Or you just have natural edit points. So that's kind of why I approached it that way.
That's awesome. Does anybody else have any other questions?
Yeah, I got a couple. It's been a while since I did podcasts or videocasts or any recording. I used to use Levelator. I heard that they killed support, or it's not actively being supported. Is there an alternative to that, or do you see future stuff running into issues, or right now it's not even it's just a moot point?
So they did, it's totally gone. In fact, it's like, the site's been archived. Like, so it's like not, I mean, you can still find it and download the software and it works, but they don't support it anymore. You can kind of like, I mean, you have to work at it, but you can fix the audio to some extent in Audacity. That's when you start becoming like, oh, well, I kind of wish I went to school for radio engineering, like sound engineering. And then there are other tools that are out there that are more like they're prosumer kind of things where, you got to pay like $100 to $200 for like a license. And they sort of kind of automate it in that same way, but the interfaces are super complicated because they want to look more like a Pro Tools kind of a thing. So you end up sort of, which I messed around with for a little bit because I didn't actually know about Levelator for a while. But that just got overly complicated. I mean, you can still use Levelator, and as long as, I guess, like, as long as it's working with whatever OS, happens to be out, that's what I would recommend, because it's the easiest one for someone who's not actually trying to literally produce a radio show.
Yeah, I found Audacity was for that sort of stuff. Like when you're working in a controlled environment, like I used to do gameplay stuff. So on me and my buddies, we'd have different channels. It was very easy to level that kind of stuff out. You didn't need Levelator.
Yeah.
But when we did, like when we were at conferences and did stuff like that, or when we were holding hackathons or something, it was a pain to use Audacity for anything like that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, because you got that ambient noise just like kills. Like you don't think it, and even when you have the headphones on, you don't think it's that bad because you're just like, your ears are just kind of hearing it. But like once it gets into the file, and it's like, how come I can't get rid of that? So like reducing that noise is like really difficult to do without those tools.
Have you dabbled with any of like the videocast software? I'd be interested on if you've paired any of that stuff with it.
I haven't. I did. I've flirted with the idea of doing that, but then I tend to go, because I work in ad agencies and I'm a producer. That's just what I've been doing. I get to the point where I'm like, okay, now I got to figure out how to light it and how to set it up. And it's like, I overcomplicate it. So I'm just like, I'm going to stay away from that because I'm going to end up buying things I shouldn't buy and spending a lot of time doing stuff. And it's not going to be seen by anyone. So, it doesn't have to be that super quality, unless I'm trying to sell a TV show, which I'm not, because now I'm learning Ruby on Rails and I want to be a web developer.
I have one more question for you, Eric. How much time do you usually spend on production for, let's say, a 30-minute, 45-minute podcast? Is this like double, 3 times, 4 times? If you produce something of like what you would consider good quality?
That's a good question. So I actually, so for the show with Dan, actually, this is a good story. So the first time we met at that bar on the rocks, and I took the stuff. I had the mics actually were new for that particular episode, which was my third. We recorded it. Something went wrong with the audio file when I was like transferring it, and it corrupted. So half the show is like recorded on the rocks, and the other half was recorded at another diner that we met like a week later. So in total, like we ended up spending like probably about 2 or 3 hours just recording it. And then I would say, like, if I had to be honest, it's not all in one sitting. I would do like 2 or 3 hours at a time, but I probably like spent a good 4 to 6 hours, like, going through the stuff, kind of seeing what I had, trying to write an outline of how to put it together, and then writing little things. And in the Dan one, I was trying to get super fancy because we were talking about, movies and like horror movies that we had both seen. And I had never seen The Thing, and he was giving me shit about it. So I decided to like, do a little like movie review. So like, then I went out and found, footage on YouTube of John Carpenter talking about the special effects guy that he hired that ended up doing special effects for Seven and Fight Club. So then I just it was just like a whole thing. Like I made like a show within a show. It was nuts. So that one was like crazy. The one with Bruce, he had like 45 minutes or an hour. He totally bolted right at the end of it. I got to record the show, and then it was just about, okay, I know exactly what I have. Most everything that I actually recorded was usable because he's actually a super articulate guy. And then the show was perfect, and thank God, like I was sitting in the right place in the room. The crowd noise was good because it was a small room, and the sound quality was easy to kind of mix. So that only took me probably about 3 hours after the recording of both of those things to get put together. So it kind of varies, but yeah.
Cool.
I mean,
Thank you.
could go down a rabbit hole. Sure.
Oh, you can go down a rabbit hole with pretty much anything, but that's interesting. It's about like 3 times the amount of the recording if you have a really good recording, and then more if things go wrong. Cool. Thank you. That was awesome.
Yeah.